This episode is brought to you by Pentester Academy TV, the leader online cybersecurity education. Cybersec Community Chat.
Viewers, welcome to another episode of Cybersec Community Chat. I am your host, Damien. Today we are pleased to have Christopher from NTU on board to this episode of Chit Chat session. Let's get our conversation started. Hello Christopher, it's a pleasure to have you on board to this episode of Cybersec Community Chat. Hello Christopher.
Hey, hi Damon. Good to see you. Unfortunately not in person.
Good to see you digitally. To kick off this session, probably you would like to share with the audience your journey into cybersecurity industry.
Okay, great, thanks. So if I have to recall back my entire almost 19 years of working experience, maybe let me break into three parts of it. I will briefly talk about my professional work and my teaching experience in cybersecurity, as well as my community involvement. So starting off with professional work. So I graduated from NTU, and I believe back then there wasn't a major in cybersecurity. So I graduated from School of Applied Science, major in computer engineering. I started my career in the telco, and it was not a cybersecurity role. But interesting fact is that over in telco, we often also encounter a lot of the cyber attacks, like DDoS and even some hacking incidents on our services. So that also sort of inspired me to really learn more about cybersecurity. So subsequently, I really get my really first role into more cybersecurity function, and I started my new job in a financial institution that manages the critical payment systems. So I was part of the security infrastructure operation team, and in this very regulated environment, I really get exposed to a lot of the policies, processes. Although because I run ops, but I have to work towards comply to those very regulated like TRM kind of policies. And subsequently, my next job that I moved into was very different. So from the banking sector, I moved into Sony. And in Sony, I actually have two parts of the experience. So maybe just to share a little bit on the first part is that I spent around 3 years in the Sony electronic business, where I'm the security architect in the global data center. And in this role, it was kind of interesting that we are going through some transformation where we are doing some form of outsourcing. So as part of my function, I look into how can we improve our security controls in an outsourced arrangement. And at the same time, I'm also taking care of the business continuity program, as well as numerous other programs that beef up our cybersecurity posture. So subsequently in 2014, I have this opportunity to be transferred into our global incident response team, and I'm actually heading up the APAC time zone for the global incident response team. That very year, again, another major incident, the Sony pictures, right? So the interesting fact is it was a very memorable one, obviously, and we really have a lot of challenges back then. But subsequently, it actually makes us better in a way that we realize that attacks are unavoidable. So because of that, we have also beefed up a lot in terms of our security capabilities. And I have this good opportunity going through that journey of massive transformation thereafter. So after Sony, I joined the General Electric incident response team as the cybersecurity leader, overseeing the APAC security incident response function. At the same time, being a manufacturing powerhouse, I also have this great opportunity to get exposed to the conversion of IT and OT security. So subsequently, I joined my NTU as the Director of Cybersecurity. So over a few years, I also oversee a massive transformation within our NTU landscape. And I have to work closely with various stakeholders, looking into how do we improve our entire cybersecurity landscape. So I want to share a little bit on the second part where I get into teaching. That started way back in 2016. I have this opportunity after being a mentor for the final year project student in Singapore Poly, and I was invited to be part of the adjunct lecturer group to teach the adults on specialist diploma in security management. Subsequently, I also get myself involved in CISSP, but that was with another local institution. Overall, I think teaching allows me to actually give back to the community. I think more importantly, the interaction with students were quite rewarding, I would say that, especially when you see your students being able to acquire new skills and progress with their career. So these are something that I feel, and I am committed in my teaching journey right now. And the third portion is talking about my involvement with the security community. I believe many of the audience may have listened through someone I know well, Stephen. He mentioned about C-Square. So I actually started my community experience way back many years, joining the C-Square GTech Lab. So I won't want to explain a lot because I think Stephen has explained that organization. But that was the time where I actually come across very interesting activities like the CTF competition. In fact, because of that experience, I also gained more exposure in terms of exploit development, reverse engineering, kind of deep tech knowledge. And at the same time, I also participate in the Honeynet project. And subsequently, I have this opportunity to meet out fellow Honeynet project members globally. And because of that opportunity, also leads me to collaborate with some of these members to co-create an open source project named Honeeepi. And it's actually a Raspbian OS that were preloaded with numbers of Honeypots. It's actually good for like people who are very new to Honeypot, and they can use that as part of their learning. So right now, I am not as active now in Honeeepi project, but I also serve in as a technical committee lead, focusing on IoT security under the Center for Strategic Cyberspace and International Studies. Beside that, I'm also currently the executive committee members for the Singapore Advanced Research and Education Network, SINGAREN in short. So SINGAREN is basically the provider for our high-speed network in the Singapore research and education community. So my role is mainly to provide advisory to the committee on network security. So I just kind of wrap up. This is a little bit of my journey into the whole cybersecurity space.
You know, you have so much wealth of experience, and that, you know, to all my users, if you to all the viewer out there, you know, watching this video, if you need any advice or mentoring, please go reach out to Christopher to ask for advice. I think he has so many pockets of, you know, experience of everywhere. You know, one personal question that I want to ask you: you prefer teaching or working in the private sector?
Okay, I think frankly speaking, teaching requires a different skills, and not everyone will enjoy. I would rather do both. Primary reason is that in order for me to impart my knowledge or teach well, I need to also have the real experience. So what I like right now is that I have this flavor of both. Of course, I have to balance it. So frankly speaking, teaching is not my core or main role. So I'm still pretty much focusing mostly on my professional work. So teaching is more like really a part where I see how I can give back. At the same time, I also feel that it's a way to keep myself updated to the knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your personal thoughts. Now, if anybody want to go into the teaching field, they may have asked you also about it. Now, let's move to your professional field. Some of the questions that I have prepared for you. With digitalization transforming in a very accelerated way by what we always say, COVID-19. What are the top cybersecurity challenges that you face in your current organization?
Well, if I were to briefly discuss on this topic, I wouldn't say that my current organization is having any unique situation with many other organizations, especially during the COVID lockdown period last year. We have to immediately scale out our ability to cater for remote secure connection in a very short span of time. At the same time, it's also during that period where many people have to pivot to online collaboration tools like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And we all are aware that when Zoom was really known by many people, they run into an issue, what we call the Zoom bombing. So we are fully aware, and fortunately, we do not really encounter much of such an issue. But at the same time, we have to, in a short span of time, start our education to our user. Because Zoom bombing was a result of a mix of both the technical functionality limitation as well as user not being careful in their configuration. So we have to actually roll out security advisory immediately to advise our user how to make the meeting to be secure. And at the same time, we also work closely with the Zoom technical team to ensure that their updates are planned out and also being rolled out subsequently. In addition, during this COVID period, we also see an increase in the email phishing attacks, especially covering the COVID-19 teams. So for that, we have to really step out, not only on our protection prevention, we also have to educate our user to be more mindful and stay vigilant over such phishing email. Many of the other aspects, like any other organization, you have to rush into action for some emergency vulnerability scanning because of changes made on applications. And I always say that it's a whole suite of how you manage in this crisis scenario, staying agile and being able to act fast.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned about educating the user. How do you guys spread more cybersecurity awareness to ensure that the user or the teams are more cyber resilient? It has been kind of difficult because everybody is working from home. It's difficult. We are not in face-to-face mode for, 21 months, 18 months.
True, it's truly a valid and a very challenging problem. And at the same time, we want to see this not as a pure technical problem. Because in order to influence and shape behavior from our user, we actually need to build a security culture. And how do we start to do that is to make sure that we have to continue to engage our users. So for the case of NTU, we have close to 40,000 staff and students who actually live and work on the campus. So we actually have to have a very scalable way to roll out our program. So this is actually achieved through a development of our actually in-house cybersecurity awareness courses that we make available where our staff and faculty will have to. We also partner with our faculty to extend such a training to our undergrad students as part of their interdisciplinary learning course. So in addition to such training, we want to make sure that our community is fully aware of cybersecurity. So we also run exhibition. One of them that we started some time back, even pre-COVID, is a campaign called Invisible Attack. In fact, there is actually an eBook that we have actually curated, which is available to be for download. So for that, we run a series of traveling exhibition beyond our campus our main campus in NTU as well as our medical school. We actually have partnership with some of the JCs to extend our traveling exhibition. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we are unable to carry out this exhibition last year. So we are planning for when the situation allows to, we may resume that. On top of that, we also partner with Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore to run this pop-up kiosk. So just like last month, we have this pop-up kiosk to be hosted in our library, and they're actually using a very innovative way, especially during this COVID period. Instead of the usual panel, they actually have a motion sensor game kiosk where you can just use your hand gesture and then answer some of the questions to get some small free gifts. And this is in our effort to beef up our awareness among our students in the as they visit the library. And last but not least, internally, we also maintain a cybersecurity awareness we call the Yama page. It's actually a corporate social media page where we constantly update our security advisory, as well as we're also doing a series of the video podcasts, and in an attempt to bring more security tips and knowledge to our community.
One question that I want to ask, how people is reacting to your podcast?
So far, we have quite a good view. I would say that on an average, we are hitting around 2,000, but I believe that we can do better. And of course, the podcast, one thing good is that it's always there, so we can always garner more viewerships. But this is kept internal, so we are still working very hard to market our cybersecurity awareness portal to our community.
I just want to ask this question is because probably there's in the future there's any opening to the public, do share with us so we can share it out to the community as well. I think it's a very good initiative from your whole team and your organization that people should be more aware about cybersecurity and be more cyber resilient. Moving on to a question, we always tend to argue that learners cannot be effectively taught in cybersecurity in private classroom setting because cybersecurity evolved so fast. This is asking you as an educator. How are cybersecurity education evolving to cope with this rapid transformation and expansion?
Yes, I would tend to agree that passive learning setup may not be the optimal, but later I'll explain a little bit on a second opinion. But let's tackle on this passive classroom. I would say that traditionally, the way we went through our own education system, we study in the classroom, and we realized that also in terms of culture, especially over in Asia, student tends to be not as vocal as what the trainer wants to be as well. But having said, with especially the COVID situation, I also realized that we have to pivot into online or e-learning style, or we have to conduct classes through Zoom. So in a way, I must say that it also poses a new challenge. But for some people who are more comfortable delving with the digital format, they could be more participative because then they could start to text questions and all this. So I would say that the technology actually also changes the way how we teach. However, my opinion towards that, technology is not the only way to replace the traditional classroom. And my reason being is that human is still a social animal, right? We have to get interaction. So having a classroom setup is not just a trainer to the learners kind of relationship or one-way traffic, because you also learn from your peers. And beside that, by having the classroom setup, it's sometimes easier to facilitate the bonding, and also it also helps to generate a different energy as compared to just leveraging on the electronic way. So I would say that we have to have a mix of both the online way of learning as well as the classroom type of learning. And I think that should be the long way to go.
So what will be your view for the future cybersecurity education to be like, and how can industry leaders contribute to improve the cybersecurity education as well?
Sure. So let's really look into current challenges within our cybersecurity industry right now. One of the teething problem which most hiring manager now faces is the talent crunch. So a lot of people say that, wow, I'm unable to hire cybersecurity talent. That also comes with a little long planning, but it's not easy to really create a cybersecurity course easily, within a short span of time. But what I could think of is that we can integrate cybersecurity as part of the integrated subject into schools. And I'm seeing that trend coming out as much as it also extend into like the secondary schools or the JCs. And even now in university, as I shared earlier on, we actually incorporate cybersecurity as part of our interdisciplinary curriculum, where all our first year students, regardless whether you are engineering students or you are humanities faculty, you all take these cybersecurity foundation classes. Second is that we wanted to look into how can we enrich our learners to have a little bit more hands-on experience. So I want to share that the terminology of experiential learning, I don't think it's something new, but it's actually a way that how can we create an opportunity for the learners to apply what they have been taught to solve real world challenges, right? So instead of just reading theory from the textbooks, right, they can actually practice what they learn in a simulated lab or even a real world environment. So the third point I'm thinking about is the adoption of technology in our cybersecurity education. We also spoke about the online e-learning style. On top of that, we should also leverage on emerging technology. The use of cloud platform is a best example that we can scale out and actually conduct more remote classes especially so during this pandemic period. We could also explore the use of AR, VR, and this may be very relevant for topics around like OT security, those operational technology where we deal with cyber physical systems.
Do you think that when you say that we have manpower crunch, in your earlier statement, do you think that there is a mismatch in expectation from students coming out from the institute to the working world?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. I wouldn't say directly it's a mismatch, but it's also due to the not so anticipated kind of a demand. But as we all know in education, it's not an easy thing to forecast, right? You can't be training a bunch of people that to fit for what you deem will be required. So this supply-demand challenge could be not only a unique problem for just cybersecurity, but whatever when it comes to emerging technology. For example, I talk about AI, I talk about blockchain. So these are also the similar challenges that the emerging technology field will face. So what I would then think about is to jump out from our traditional way of looking at candidates having that kind of, let's say, a degree in cybersecurity or a degree in comm science. You may have to then start to consider the attribute of an individual, whether he is a fast learner or he has a passion into this field, and he can be trained and to fit the job well as well. Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting train of thoughts about how hiring managers should also think about not judging through based on their degree but also their attributes. I think that's a good point that cybersecurity is an ongoing learning thing, passions and stuff that people always talk about. And as we are still talking about the manpower crunch and people, we are funneling people coming to the cybersecurity industry. We have now also encouraging a lot of non-technical personnel coming to cybersecurity industry, take up courses and stuff. What's your advice for non-technical personnel coming into this industry?
Yes, like what you rightly pointed out, because of this supply-demand problem. So just now I mentioned that we should also consider non-technical people. Because in a space of cybersecurity, like what I have described earlier in my explanation on the cybersecurity awareness part, not all technical people are also good in doing user engagement. So you then realize that you need a talent pool where they can help to develop engaging cybersecurity, let's say, training materials and approaches of engaging users is very different from how a technical person will do. So I would then encourage for those non-technical personnel, they could have a foothold in this industry by looking into the soft skill aspect. Of course, as you get into this sector, you can also strengthen your knowledge over that. So personally, in my own team, I have done so. I actually have a non-com science or technical staff that actually joined my team. And she definitely contribute a lot in terms of the creative part. And on top of that, also we collaborate with our teams from our learning tech and media team to co-create a lot of all these courses that I described. So that is one aspect. Of course, more importantly is individual passion and attribute. I've personally seen through a number of people that I know personally who are non-technical degree, but they are doing extremely well. They can do coding and they are also progressing very well in the cybersecurity industry. Of course, on top of that, as individual, right, how can you start this journey? Because you are non-technical, right, without the qualification or certification. So few of the things I can think through is that you can start to join some interest group, like how I have done so many years ago. And I believe now there are even more interest group for any aspiring individual to join and network with people and learn from them. So the best way of progressing in one's career is talking about finding the right mentor and also learning from people who have walked the path. Of course, on top of that, on your own personal interests, I would say that we are not short of resources or even learning opportunity, because right now there are many YouTube's video that will teach you step by step how to do probably to do a pen test, and there are many others such, whether it's paid or the free one. Of course, you want to have a hands-on experience, then you can dabble with open source software, which I believe this will be a good learning opportunity for anyone. Sell your home lab and have fun with it. Yeah. So these are some of the things that I think through for people who are really non-tech, but you can do all this and it will definitely open doors for yourself into this industry. Yeah.
Okay. I think you hit a lot of good points, in terms of people coming into this industry as a non-technical personnel. And to wrap up this whole session, I have one last question for you. Do you think that what would be your advice, for current people that is in cybersecurity to continue to progress in their career?
Okay, I think as a practitioner myself, working in cybersecurity, we also realize that things change very fast with the introduction of emerging technology, and many other things were changing, transforming. We have to continuously upgrade ourselves by acquiring new skills ourselves. I also see that besides just keeping ourselves up with these technology changes, right, we also need to acquire cross-domain knowledge. So I give, for example, going back to the security awareness. So it would be extremely helpful if we can also acquire some digital marketing skills, social media skills, or even videography, photography, or even some design sense. But I know that it's not easy for everyone to have such a flair, but I would say that fundamentally we should have a little bit of some knowledge so that we can also work with the teams to curate some of this. Of course, on top of that, if you really think about human behavior, if you start to also understand areas into psychology, right, or even doing change management, some concept of sociology, this will also come in handily, maybe even as pen tester, because imagine that you can understand how humans behave, you can actually work into the area where you attack the human weaknesses. So these are some of my thoughts that I think as cybersecurity practitioner, we will never stop being curious and continue to acquire cross-domain knowledge across.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting about you mentioning about psychology, because recently I just spoken to a student that say that their second major is psychology while he's taking a cybersecurity degree, and he did mention about, to understand how user behave, how a hacker think as well. I said, oh, never thought about it, but I think it's kind of relating to what people are thinking, and I think it's a good point that you have pointed out that we should really explore, other stuff to make our skill more comprehensive and benefit to the people. Thank you so much, Christopher, for the time that I have with you in this conversation. And I do hope that the user, all our viewer, enjoy the conversations that we are having. To all our viewer out there, if you have any questions or you have any advice that you need to ask Christopher, we will probably share into our video description. You may ping him to ask any questions. Thank you so much, Christopher, once again for coming on board to these sessions of Chit Chat session, and you share really a wealth of wisdom and takes thoughts to our audience. And we do hope that our audience watch our this episode and also our next episode of Cybersec Community Chat. Thank you so much, Christopher. Bye-bye.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Damien. I hope to see you in person soon.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.